Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. It's cold out there, isn't it? Very, very cold, as you can see. That time of the year where I switch over to the knitwear. Very, very cold out there. Regardless of where you are in the country, I'm sure you're feeling the chill this morning. Let's have a look. Who do we have in our midst? Dan Cullen was first off the mark at 9:58. In actual fact, I very nearly missed the start of my own show this morning because I was working on a podcast. There's a new report out, which I'll be sharing with you a bit later on. New report out that says we've actually seen a decline in the number of women in construction. So all of the razzmatazz and all of the shouting and the initiatives and the campaigns not making a blind bit of difference. There's Dan Cullen saying another day, another nightmare. Hope it's not quite that bad. Ken Hatcher is here as well. Who else do we have here? Mark Whiting is here because, frankly, no show is complete without him. Who else is here? I'll come back to Dan Cullen in just a moment. Gary Muirhead is here though. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to you, my friend. Andy Golding has just joined us over on Instagram as well. So good morning to you. Red Dem Limited as well over on Instagram. Now, Dan Cullen says, starting to get pissed off in this industry. It's, yes, it is that. Ask you to go to a job, then that night off hire with no warning. Yeah. Gary Muirhead. Yes, I was going to come to this. I see the banner is back at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, okay. So, Gary, thank you for keying that in. I know I didn't ask you to do it, but I'm grateful. We're trying something new today. If you look very closely, and Gary clearly is watching very closely, if you're on a mobile, you'll need to look very, very closely indeed. You'll see a new news ticker just going across this. Hang on a minute. Let me do it the right way around. There we are. It's... There's a news ticker going across. Obviously, I've borrowed the idea from Sky News, but I've chosen to launch it today because two of the news items actually relate to my morning monologue, which I'll get to. But I know Mick Norton. I've not seen Mick so far, but I think he used to work for Roger Bullivant. Roger Bullivant, obviously an absolute legend of the piling industry, has passed away, sadly. But as you can see there, House Builder Campstead goes into administration and ESS Modular has gone down owing £7 million. All of which relates to my morning monologue, so stick around for that. Jim Turner has just joined us. Morning, Jim. Ken Hatcher says, what's it say, the banner? It says, piling legend Roger Bullivant has passed away, House Builder Campstead has gone into administration, and ESS Modular went down owing its supply chain 7 million of your Welsh pounds. And Dan Cullen says, that looks absolutely great. Thank you very much indeed, Dan. And Footy has just joined us. Good morning, Footy. Thank you very much indeed for being here. As I say, the morning monologue today is, I'll tell you all about it in just a moment, but it is basically about how Tier 1 and major contractors say they're treating their supply chain when they're doing something rather different. So, without further ado, let me roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show on the road. Ken Hatcher has just said their office was in Port Talbot. Which one? Was that Campstead? Was Campstead based in Port Talbot? Let us know, Ken. Love to hear from you. We'll come back to all things related to the question of the day in just a moment. Do need to tidy the screen now because I don't need to tell you who I am. I think you probably know that by now. That's much, much better. Let's go back to here. That's not the right part. Let me go to there. That's much, much better. It is Wednesday, the 20th of November. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. You know, the Walrus of Demolition. In today's show, keeping cables tidy on a massive scale with Liebherr. we're getting comfortable with Magni, keeping Africa's beaches clean with Case, and we're going to get a sneak peek at the latest wheel loader from those fine folks at Shantui. Plus, in my morning monologue, we'll be discussing how many major and tier one contractors really see their supply chain, which obviously is very appropriate for today. Had to think about it. I'll come back to the comment from Gary Muirhead in just a moment. I'm going to say good morning to Lee Upton. Morning, Lee. How are you doing, my friend? Good to see you. Haven't seen you here for a while, but yeah. Let's have a look. Dan Cullen's saying maybe going to Cambridge to pick up my work gear. What a pain in the back end that is. But good luck with all of that. Gary, I promise I'll come back to your comment in just a moment because we do need to crack on with the mystery machine. When I remind people of the question of the day, I'll bring you on. Excuse me. So mystery machine. Let's have a look. Yeah, Dan Cullen is already in the lead once again. What have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got 12 points. I'm on 6. And everybody else is playing catch up after that. So, can anyone steal the thunder from Dan Cullen today? There's the machine I need you to identify. I'll come back to that in just a moment. We've got not alone supply chain. What about the workforce? There is obviously the knock-on effect. I think the issue with it all is, and well, I'll get to it in the morning monologue, but I just feel like sometimes the industry is kind of taking the mick out of those below the top tier. I say sometimes, I mean pretty much all the time. We'll come to it at the end, but you're absolutely right, Dan. The supply chain is very, very poorly treated. It will play in just a second. Very, very poorly treated, but then so is the workforce. So Gary Muirhead is leaping in with his guess on the mystery machine, saying a Cat 950F. It is not a Cat 950F. It is not a Cat at all. Chris Ford has just arrived as well. Good morning, troops. Better late than never. Absolutely. We can start the show now, people. I know we've all been twiddling our thumbs and treading water, but he's here now. Jim Turner reckons that the machine could be a weather loader. It is not one of those. Comes from a little further afield than that. That's all I can tell you right now. Ken Hatcher reckons it's an old roller. It's not. Footy reckons it could be a cat dozer. It's not. Dan Cullen reckons it could be a Muirhead, as in Gary. B5000. It's not one of those either. Shall I show you a bit more just to keep you on side? There you are. That's what you're working with. What I would tell you is, I don't want to give too much away, but today's mystery machine is a familiar brand, but not necessarily a familiar model, at least for this part of the world anyway. Yeah. AD Equipment has just joined us over on Instagram. Good morning to you. Good. Hope you're having a fine day. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Well, while we're doing that, I'm going to remind you of the question of the day because we've got a couple of comments that already relate to it. So here it is. Yeah, our question of the day today is quite simply: what is the best way to waste time? I was half of a mind to put reading books, but I don't actually consider that to be a waste of time. So personally, I'm going to go fishing. Even if there's no actual fishing involved, being by the water, so sitting on a beach, walking along a river, that's my favourite waste of time. But I do need to go back to Gary Muirhead because I don't know quite how he managed to remember this. He says, question of the day, Owen Paul. Anybody else remember that? Owen Paul, singer from the 80s who had a song called You're My Favourite Waste of Time. Didn't particularly like the song, but I do remember it. Well done indeed. And Chris Ford, in answer to our question of the day, says, can't say, the wife might read it, but in brackets he says, buying Priestman excavators. Don't worry, Chris, your secret is safe with me. Now let's have a look. hang on a minute. Let me go back to here. We've got from Dan Cullen. He reckons it could be a Fiat Alice loading shovel. It's not. I reckon that is a mistype or a mispronunciation. I reckon that's a Liebherr dozer. It's not one of those either. Chris Ford going for the D57S. It's not. Early Komatsu loading shovel. It's not. Evelyn Barford shovel. It's not. Evelyn Barford TS250. It is not. Not a Volvo BM 621 either. So let me show you just a smidge more. There you are. Anybody can get that. I'll be very impressed. Do need to say good morning to Garvin over at Mostly Diggers. Just joined us, as he so often does, over on Instagram. We'll come back to that in a moment because we do need to start the show with a bit of this. Garvin has offered up a Clark wheel loader over on Instagram. It's not one of those either. Keep the ball rolling. There's a bit more. Oh, look, shocker. It's on wheels. Yeah, keep the guesses coming in on that. You might remember maybe a year or so ago, we told you that Liebherr had developed kind of a real system to keep the electric cables for its mining excavators all nice and tidy so they won't run over and damaged and everything else. At the time, it was a prototype. It's the real thing now. Here it is. Lots of guesses coming on the mystery machine. I'll come to that in just a moment. But we've had a comment here from I'm going to try at Sklabeni, who says bonjour, bonjour. Back to you, my friend. Ça va? Good. That's all my French done, by the way. So don't bother coming back with any more French because that's all I've got. Right. Okay. So mystery machine looks like that. Gary Muirhead was going for a Volvo BM 621 footy. I think that's supposed to be a tracked loading shovel. It's not. It's definitely on wheels. Chris Ford is going for a Cat 963. It is not a Cat of any description. Is it a Michigan? It is not. Is it a Hoff? It is not. Is it a Komatsu? It is not. Is it an FS22 wheel loader? It is not. Is it an International H65? It is not. Nobody's even got the right brand yet. Let me show you just a smidge more. There you are. It's not that old, to be honest. It's not that old. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a current, but it's not as old as some people are suggesting. All I would say is it's a familiar brand, but not necessarily a familiar model. There you are. Go over to Instagram, because Mostly Diggers, Garvin says, I remember visiting the Ace of Spades walking drag line up in the north of England many moons ago, and they had a big John Deere tractor to pull the cable out of its way when it needed to walk back. Yeah. Imagine having a tractor just dedicated to keeping your cables tidy. That's how big these machines actually are. What have we got here? Dan Cullen's going for the International H65. I think I may have mentioned that. Footy is going for the JCB loading shovel. It is not. It's none of those things. Keep the guesses coming. We'll take that away just for now, because it is time for a smidgen of this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, another guess from Dan Cullen. He's going with a Caterpillar 930. I can tell you it is most definitely 100% not a Caterpillar. It is not a JCB. It is not a Komatsu. It is not a Liebherr, nor is it a Michigan, a Hoff, or an International. It is none of those things. Nobody's got the right make yet. Here's just a bit more. Doesn't help at all, I'm sure, but there's a bit more. Keep the guesses coming. So, yes. So that was a fairly old-fashioned looking cab. Let's go to something a little more modern and maybe a little bit more comfortable as well. This comes direct from those fine folks at Magni. Isn't the Italian language just better? We call it a sun visor or a screen. They call it a tendina parasole. Tendina parasole. I'm sure he's a motor racing driver. I may have made that up. Going back to the Mystery Machine. Chris Ford is going for a Weatherall L62. It is not. Gary Muirhead going for a Case W26. No, it's not. Dan Cullen going for the Lugol CLG 856. It is not. It's none of those things. Nobody's got the right make yet. Keep the guesses coming. There are 2 more videos. If you don't get it within the next 2 videos, I win, and I get a bit closer to Dan Cullen. In the meantime, there's this. Having just said that I've used up all my schoolboy French, I haven't. I can tell you the name of the destination we're headed to next in French. We're going with Case to Africa. More specifically, we're going to the Ivory Coast, or as they say in France, and quite possibly in the place itself, Côte d'Ivoire. Looks very nice there, doesn't it? Particularly at sunset. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Ken Hatcher saying the good old case backhoe. Yes, absolutely. The good old case backhoe. Don't see as many of them as we used to, but still enjoy seeing one when they pop along. Dan Cullen is going for a Komatsu WA80 for our mystery machine. Still nobody's got the right make. Can't believe it. Can't believe it. We've got one more video to play you, which will be along immediately after this. And if you don't get it by then, I declare victory. And I go like this to everybody. Probably won't get around to doing that. Back after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Now, Chris Ford has said, is it a Terex loading shovel? It's not. It's not. Just as a final clue, this is not its normal colour. I'll tell you that. It's not a Terex. I'll tell you that for nothing. It's not a Komatsu, not a Cat, not a Lugong. It's none of those things. But that is not the colour with which we are most familiar in this part of the world. And I've already done this. So obviously we're looking right there at a wheel loader. We're about to look at another one because Shantui has given us a very, very quick sneak preview of the latest model to join their wheel loader line. And it looks like this. Yeah, it looks pretty damn smart to me. I look forward to seeing more of that in the fullness of time. And I can tell you, today I win because the latest guesses are from Ken Hatcher, who reckons it could be a cat wheel dozer. It's most definitely not one of those. Jim Turner reckons it could be a Samsung. It's not one of those either. Let me reveal all. It is a Kobelco. That is an LK400, just in case you were wondering. So let me break out the Victor's pen. Hang on a minute. I need to show you this. I need to do this. The Victor's pen. You see, the Victor's pen. And I'm going to put MA alongside that. And I'm going to claim my 3 points because I have won today. I could cheat this all the time. I just change colour of things. But I'm not going to do that because that's not the kind of guy I am. But I'm going to claim the 3 points. So as it stands at the moment, Dan Cullen is on 12 points. I'm on 9. And Chris Ford has got 3. Not much else to be reported on there, actually. Russell Mashevsky, all the way down in New Zealand. He's got 3 points as well, but I don't think he's going to catch myself or Dan. But there's Dan saying, well done, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. And lol indeed. Right, okay, that pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second, and then I want to leap gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, and I really would urge you to do so, but if you can't stick around, then please do stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Stay safe. Stay warm. Definitely stay warm. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I'll be back immediately after this. When things are going well for those at the top of the industry, they adopt many varied names for the plethora of contractors, subcontractors, service providers, and suppliers that help them along the way. They are the supply chain, collaborators, specialists, solutions providers, partners, team members, and even, God forbid, a part of the family. When things go awry at the top, however, when things go sideways, or when things go tits up, all of those words and descriptions are replaced by just one: victims. Whether major contractors have fallen victim to economic shifts, beyond their control, the fallout from a global pandemic, or they've hit the buffers through excessive ambition or poor management, the end result is always the same. Those major contractors scratch their beards in dismay and offer explanations and excuses, while those former collaborators and partners are left to lick their wounds. All too often, those within the supply chain are thrown under the financial bus. Those solutions providers are left to seek financial solutions of their own, and those family members are cast off like an errant child. Let's not sugarcoat this or pretend it's a rare occurrence. In this industry, crises are cyclical, just as predictable as the turning of the seasons. The scale of the collapse might vary, but the ripples it sends out are always the same. For every large contractor that folds, dozens, if not hundreds, of smaller companies go down with them. The scaffolding firm that hasn't been paid for 3 months, the haulage company still chasing invoices, the welding specialist who delivered a flawless job but won't see a penny because they're way too far down the payment chain. Each is a domino in a line that stretches further than the eye can see. What's remarkable is the language used when the dust settles. Those at the top speak of unforeseen circumstances or external pressures. Rarely, if ever, do they speak of mismanagement or our failure to plan. No. The blame is deflected outward, upward, anywhere but inward. It's an economic version of the blame game, and the casualties are usually the ones who believed in the promises of the partnership, loyalty, and mutual respect. When times are good, the rhetoric of inclusivity is intoxicating. We're all in this together, they say. Company dinners, team building days, little awards, trophies, certificates, perhaps even a Christmas card signed by the CEO. But when the tide turns, that family bond becomes strangely one-sided. The big players might tighten their belts, delay some projects, and announce a restructuring, but they won't lose their livelihoods. Meanwhile, the family is told there's no money for overdue payments, no rescue funds for struggling businesses in their network, and no time to return phone calls. A family member would lend you a hand when you stumble. In this industry, you're just as likely to get your fingers stepped on as they rush to protect their own. And what of those promises, the guarantees, the contracts, the supposed safety nets that are supposed to bind these relationships? They're written in ink, sure, but in this game, ink is more water-soluble than it appears. When insolvency looms, contracts become meaningless. The small print becomes large print, and clauses you never even notice suddenly take on critical importance. Legal protections are little comfort when the other party is filed for administration, leaving a queue of creditors fighting for scraps. And then there's the psychological toll. Think of the small business owner who's built their company from the ground up, who invested not just money but their soul into the work. For them, the collapse of a major contractor is not just a financial disaster, it's a betrayal. They trusted the big names, perhaps even admired them. They believed the spiel about partnership and shared goals. When it all comes crashing down, they're not just out of pocket, they're disillusioned, heartbroken, and they're often left wondering if they can ever trust anyone in the industry again. Now, this industry loves to talk about resilience. We hear it in speeches, in trade magazines, at conferences. Resilience is a badge of honor, the mantra that supposedly gets everyone through tough times. But resilience for whom? For the big players who get bailed out, who restructure with a wink and a nod, who quietly slip into new ventures under new names? Or for the small businesses and individual workers who have to start again from scratch, often carrying the scars of their last partnership? There's a dark irony to all of this. The demolition construction industry prides itself on its ability to build and rebuild, to adapt and innovate. And yet when it comes to its own internal structures, it's all as fragile as a house of cards. The foundation of trust that should underpin these relationships is paper thin, and when one card falls, the rest follow in very, very quick succession. So what's the solution? Transparency would be a good start. If major contractors were upfront about their financial health, their limitations, their potential vulnerabilities, smaller players could at least make informed decisions. Instead of being strung along with false promises, they could diversify their client base, plan for contingencies, or even walk away from untenable contracts. But honesty is often in short supply when reputations are on the line, and so the cycle continues. Regulation could play a role too. Stronger laws around payment practices, stricter penalties for late payments and protections for smaller businesses caught in the crossfire could create a fairer and more level playing field. But legislation moves at a snail's pace, and by the time rules are implemented, the damage is often already done. Ultimately, though, the industry needs a cultural shift. It needs to stop treating smaller businesses as expendable assets and start valuing them as the lifeblood of the sector, which is exactly what they are. Without them, nothing gets built, nothing gets demolished, nothing moves forward. The major contractors might be the figureheads, but the real work, the real expertise, the real graft comes from those so often left behind when the going gets tough. In this industry, survival isn't about resilience. It's about vigilance. It's about knowing who you're dealing with, understanding the risks and preparing for the day when the phone stops ringing, the payments stop coming, and the family door is slammed shut. Because when things go awry, the only name you'll be left with is the one at the top of the list of creditors, waiting in line with all the other victims. So the next time you hear a big contractor waxing lyrical about their collaborators, their partners, and their family, take it with a pinch of salt and know that many of them actually mean fools, suckers, dupes, and fall guys. There is my thought for the day. What is the chat saying? I can put this back up now. What is the chat saying? The chat is saying, Mick Norton says, yes, indeed. Sad news indeed at the passing of piling legend Roger Bullivant. It was a great privilege to have worked for him for 10 years. I did actually mention that at the top of the show, Mick. I know you had your connections with Roger Bullivant. I know nothing. I know nothing anyway, but I know virtually nothing about piling. But even I am aware of the name Roger Bullivant, but also the influence that he had in that particular sector. So yes, our thoughts are obviously with his family. By the sound of it, he's been ill for quite some time, and he was 85 when he passed away. But yeah, still a major loss. So yes, I tip my forelock in his general direction. Dan Cullen says, yes, very true. We're all victims to these companies. Always a blame game with these bunch. Yeah. Listen, I'm not. Obviously, I always talk about demolition and construction because that's what this show is about. I'm sure many of the things that I talk about on here, particularly today, I'm sure this is equally relevant in other industry sectors. Engineering, pharmaceutical, the tech industry. I'm sure all of this happens all the time, throughout all the various industries. But we know that now. We know that if there is a major company at the top that relies on a bunch of suppliers and supply chain and partners, and we know that if they go pop, they go pop. The top goes pop, and everybody below them suffers. We've experienced this for decades, centuries probably. Knowing that, should it not be? I'm doing this on the fly, but let me throw this out there. I was talking yesterday about pre-qualification questionnaires, PQQs. So if you want to be on the tender list for Mace, Balfour Beatty, Lang O'Rourke, Waits, Uncle Tom Cobley, if you are a smaller contractor, specialist contractor, a demolition contractor, a scaffolder, whatever it might be, if you want to work for one of those major companies, you are required to fill out a PQQ, which is, so gives them all your details, your insurance details, your VAT number, your company registration number, and all of that kind of thing. What about one going the other way? What about one going the other way? Where us as suppliers to these major companies can look into precisely what we're letting ourselves in for. Now, I do it myself. If I'm working with somebody that I've never worked with before, I do run a credit check, but that only gives you part of the answer. It flags up if they've got winding up orders against them. And it basically scores them on their financial reliability. I fully understand that, but ultimately that doesn't give you the full picture. Wouldn't it be better if you could see, what is their average payment time? If they're somewhere between 30 and 60 days, all right, that sounds, in this day and age and in this industry, that sounds pretty reasonable. I'd probably take a bit of a punt on that. If it's 90 to 100 120 days, I'd be thinking twice. If their track record shows that their payment terms are usually about 6 months and only after a great deal of negotiation and, excuses and that kind of thing, chances are I'd say, do you know what? Either pay me up front or not for me, thank you. Why do we not have that option? I'm going to go over to here because Jim Turner says Bullivants aren't in today on our site, so maybe the firm has been stood down for the day out of respect. I think if anybody in the industry deserves a bit of respect on his name, I would say Roger Bullivant is most certainly one of those. There aren't that many people, I don't think, that you can link so directly to an industry sector. Joe Bamford, Lord Bamford. Is he still Lord Bamford? Because he's not in the House of Lords anymore. But, Anthony Bamford. Sir Anthony Bamford, Lord Bamford. Joe's son. When you think of the name Bamford, you think immediately of backhoe loaders and telescopic handlers. Roger Bullivant, you think piling. Can't think of too many more that have that same kind of link with the industry that they built and helped to serve. If anybody can think of any more of those, please let me know. The issue with going back to this business about payments and companies going to administration, and that's the reason I've kept this up, because this is just a random day. These are both from Construction Inquirer today. So house builder Camstead has gone into administration. That's news of today. And ESS Modular, which went down maybe a week or so ago, has gone down owing £7 million. That £7 million is owed to its supply chain. So where are we? We're 5 Fridays from Christmas. So if you filter down enough in that ESS Modular creditors list, there are probably 1, 2, and 3-man bands who are now looking at Christmas thinking, how do I explain that to the missus? I committed us to 4, 5, 10, 20 grand's worth of work with ESS Modular, and they've gone pop, and I'm not going to get that. How do I explain that to the wife? How do I explain that to the kids? Santa's not coming because there's an arsehole up the road who took me for a fool. How do you do that? And over £7 million, £7 million, there are going to be probably dozens of those people having that very conversation with their staff, with their wives, with their children and everything else. And bearing in mind, I can't remember the exact numbers, but bearing in mind the number of insolvencies we've had this year, and particularly when you get up into the big ones like the ISGs. What was ISG? 300 million owed to its supply chain? I mean, think about the breadth of its supply chain, but also think about the depth of its supply chain. Yes, it will have employed, ISG will have employed, major contractors as, their solutions providers and their subcontractors. But that will also have included people, painters and decorators, fit-out companies, plasterers, plumbers, electricians, and so on down the line. Small companies, possibly 1-man band or 1 or 2-man band, that cannot afford to take that level of hit. And the issue we have, I think, is there are names that have a reputation. I genuinely think if you are a small company, a small specialist contractor, and you get through the PQQ and you get through the tender process to win some work with somebody like Balfour Beatty or Mace or Waits, you're probably patting yourself on the back. You've obviously been asked to do it at a price. You're probably not making a huge amount of profit because nobody in this industry really does because the margins are so thin. But you could pat yourself on the back. Look at me. I started a company from nothing, and here I am working for a company of the size and the reputation of Balfour Beatty. That is a major pat on your own back. I would imagine there were people who had that very, very same feeling. I've arrived. I am now playing with the big boys. I'm on the top table because I have won some work from Carillion. I am now an elite subcontractor because I am now working for ISG. And how did that all turn out? You didn't get paid. There is an imbalance. There is an imbalance. When you think about all the hoops and obstacles that you are expected to overcome as a subcontractor in order to be given the privilege of working with one of these major contractors. Why aren't they doing the same? We had an instance recently, and I'm going slightly off at a kilter here, but we were trying to buy a flat recently, a property investment. I won't bore you with the details, but it's a flat just up the road, and and it was only 7 years old, so not particularly old. Now, when you're selling a property these days, you have to produce what they call a seller's pack, to make sure the boiler's up to date and the smoke detectors work and all the bollocks that goes with it. So we got one of those, and everything looked to be in order. We got right the way down the line, so I've ended up paying solicitors and various other bits and pieces, done all of that. And lo and behold, our solicitor found the fact that there was a clause in there that meant the ground rent on the flat could be increased or doubled overnight, basically ad infinitum. So the ground rent could be 250 quid this week, could be 500 quid the week after that, could be 1,000 quid in a year's time, and so on down the line. The advice of the solicitor was you will probably struggle to sell it because most mortgage companies will look at that and go, nope, don't fancy that. But it took us 5 months and the investigation of a solicitor to find that out. It's the same that we've got here. Why should you only discover the truth of the deal that you're going into when it's too late? When you've already done the work, when you've committed men and machinery, when you've paid for travel, when you've paid for accommodation, when you've paid for fuel and insurance, and you've put your heart and soul into delivering a proper job, at which point you discover that the major contractor for whom you've been working is not what you believed they were. And I've seen so many instances where companies have done some work for a company and not been paid, or they've only been paid part, and then they get the phone call, look, we will pay you, but could you do this thing as well, and then we'll pay you in one big lump. Now, having seen it as many times as I have, my inclination would be say, no, you pay up and then we'll talk about the work that you want done. But so many companies will say, yeah, okay, we want to maintain the relationship, because ultimately, if I'm exactly the same. If there's an opportunity of working with, an advertiser or a sponsor on a long-term basis, we come to an arrangement. Maybe the rates are a little bit less because we're looking at long-term work and everything else. And people do that. Okay, yeah, well, listen, we'll wait another 30 days for that money because we're going to get that money as well. And then when you get to the end of that other 30 days, you then realise not only have you been mugged off for that bit of money, you've now been mugged off for that bit as well. There should be a system in place. I'm bearing in mind this is all electronic. To be able to type into your system, is ISG worth the risk? Is Carillion worth the risk? Is ESS modular worth the risk? And for that system to come back and say, do you know what, dodgy, or don't touch them with a barge pole, or yeah, they're good as gold, yeah, they've got a fantastic track record, they pay on 30 days without fail. Should we not have that by now? Just going back to the estate agent thing, because they're awful and useless. Think about that. If I want to go and buy a car, I don't, but if I want to go and buy a car for 20, 30, 40,000 pounds, I can go to the car or go to the garage, say, I want that one there, but I want it in blue. Okay, you can have it in blue. Okay, how much is the cost? Now, depending on the particular debit card or credit card you have, you might even be able to just flash a piece of plastic and it goes over the wire. Failing that, you can do a bank transfer, go to your bank, send them the money, and then you get the keys to the car. With a house, you have to have a solicitor, and the seller has to have a solicitor, and those solicitors have to send bits of paper through the post, and then on the appointed day when you're supposed to exchange contracts, never seems to happen much before about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they then, I don't know, by pigeon or cannonball. They transfer the money, and then they get a bit of written authorization that says, there you go. What the hell? What? Why? And the same with this. You know, we have, I can send somebody in the audience, I can send Fred, I can send my wife some money on my phone, and it instantly arrives. So that, you know, there is no excuse for late payments. And this business about, you know, there's nobody here to sign the checks. Nobody sent a fucking check in years. Stop pissballing about. Just send me the money. And if you can't send me the money, then think, I'm doing this on the fly again. Anybody else using the sat-nav system Waze, W-A-Z-E? I'll let that sink in. So Waze. I've got Apple Maps on my phone. I've got Google Maps on my phone, but I use Waze. And Waze is basically crowdsourced information. So it tracks your progress. So if last time I used it, where was I going? Birmingham, maybe? I don't know. So you put in, I want to go from here to there, and it will track your progress. And if there are bits where you are slowing down, it will send that to all other users that there is some sort of issue on that bit of the road. You can also enter into it. I've never done this, but I'm grateful for those that have done it. You can also enter it. If there's been a breakdown or an accident on a particular stretch of road, you can enter that into the Waze app, and the Waze app will then communicate that with everybody that's coming up behind you to say, you know, there's an accident, there's a breakdown, there's pedestrians in the road, or whatever it might be. So you have advanced warning of what you've got to come. Why can we not have that with the financial well-being of major contractors? I am going to work with Mace. You might need to be aware of this or this or this. They have pending payments. They have outstanding, sorry, Mace, I don't know if this is the case, but they have outstanding winding up petitions against them or whatever it might be. And you can then make an informed decision rather than going into a deal like, do you want the deal? Well, yeah, kind of. I kind of. I want the deal, but mainly because I want the money. I don't want the deal just so that I can say that I work with Mesa Alpha Beta. I want the money. And if you knew that money might not be forthcoming, you might make a different decision before you actually started work. Well done, Chris. I started a company with nothing and I've still got most of it left. Only most. Jim Turner said it's called coming, and firms, gaffers and acquaintances will try it on sooner or later. That's while they should all be pulled up and straightened out the first time they try it. That way they either go away or they never try it again. Imagine that. So going back to my Waze analogy, imagine that. Bearing in mind that most of these major contractors don't actually do much in the way of construction or demolition themselves. You know, it's all farmed out to specialists and suppliers and whatever. If you had the weight of popular opinion against a major contractor, you know, if there was an app or a website or whatever it might be that said this major contractor is a financial risk for whatever reason, and everybody could then decide en masse, yeah, not for me, thanks. They would have that might force them into administration, but everybody that had already seen that information would be protected. Or it might actually make them, as Jim turns it, straighten themselves out. You know, if I've got to the point where I've been so bad at paying my supply chain that I now have a reputation as a non-payer, and as a result, I can't get anybody to work for me, what choice have they got? They've got two choices. They either pay their supply chain as they're supposed to, or they shut up shop. Chris Ford says that the wife and brother still pay with checks. Total technophobics. Don't even mention emails. Listen, I can think of at least two people in the UK demolition industry who have secretaries. They still have those. They have secretaries print off their emails because they can't deal with a computer. They like bits of paper. 2024. Yeah. Peter McKenna has just joined us. Hi, all. Hope you're having a good week. Taking car for repair and re-MOT. Hopefully getting my new car before the week is out. Fingers crossed. There's Dan Cullen saying exactly the same. Wish you luck, Peter. You did tell us, aren't you going electric? Was it you that was going electric or hybrid or something? Let us know. My aunt is 18, does everything with her mobile. Emails, banking, socials, even writing poetry. She would be lost without her mobile phone nowadays. Yeah, my parents were well, no, that's not true. Half of my parents were. My dad died a technophobe. Couldn't even program his VCR, and assuming, people still have VCRs, couldn't do that. But my mum, mobile banking, online shopping, all of that, yeah, not a problem at all. Peter McKenna is going electric, full electric, in fact, with the Skoda. How do you pronounce that? Enyaq? I'm taking a while. Enyaq? Enyaqu? Oh. Somebody can tell me how that's pronounced. I don't know how you're going to tell me how it's pronounced, but something like that. Isn't every day a financial risk when you're in business? The only guarantee in life is death. And apparently, yes, it is pronounced Enyaq. I had a wild stab, and my wild stab hit the spot. It is. But yeah, listen, we did a bit of this yesterday. What is one of the key tenets of this industry? Risk assessment. If you arrive now, I want to use Demolition as my example. If you arrive on a site and the building is leaning at a horrendous angle, and you can hear the steel popping and creaking, and there's bits of debris falling off the building even before you've touched it, even somebody not related to the demolition industry would look at that and go, "Yee, that looks dicey. Not sure about that." Should you not have that same ability with the financial stability of the company for whom you are about to work? I'm not saying that they should open their books, although, frankly, I think many of them expect you to do the same. There are lots and lots of demolition contractors who continue to thrive and survive and thrive because they have sufficient economic and financial heft whereby they on paper they can demonstrate that they have enough money in the bank to see that job through to fruition. What about doing that the other way around? Here's my books. You can see I've got 10 million quid on tap. Should anything goes wrong, I've got insurance, but I've got 10 million quid in the bank. We have the financial weight to get this through to fruition. I've shown you mine. Now you show me yours. You show me your bank balance to prove that when the job is done to everybody's satisfaction, that you have the money and you're intending to pay it. We shouldn't even be having this conversation. In absolute truth, there are contracts out there, even those that are not written down, those that are done on a handshake. How much is that going to be? It's 500 quid. Done? Done. Right, handshake, job done, 500 quid. There's the job, there's the 500 quid. It shouldn't be that hard. Peter McKenna describing his car, 286 brake horsepower, 0 to 100 in 6.7 seconds, if you can hang on that long. Peter McKenna says there's two guarantees in life, taxes and death. Yeah, that's taxes, not taxis. I'm not talking about like mini cabs and stuff. There's no certainty about mini cabs whatsoever. Dan Cullen. Like risk, I took £236 of travel fare to so-called ongoing job to be told last night not needed anymore. Was all word of mouth. That, to my mind, no, not to my mind, that money should be recoupable. Now, I don't know whether that's the employer or the potential employer that wanted to see you. I don't know if you've done that through an agency. None of that should matter. Whoever sent you for that job and that required you to incur 236 quid's worth of travel, as far as I'm concerned, there is no question about it, you are owed that money. because otherwise you've basically been mugged off. And that out of my pocket was same Monday for different jobs, got cancelled 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. Disgraceful. You know, we talk a lot about workers' rights and that kind of thing. You know, if you're an employee, you are required to be given notice, a week's notice, 2 weeks' notice, a month's notice, or whatever it might be. If you're working through an agency, they don't even need to tell you before you get there. You just pitch up, oh, no, not today. Fuck off. Why? How? How is that allowed to be the case? Peter says, we have said this before, unless you're employed, there is no job security. No, there's not. There's not. And listen, I understand that. And you know, I'm not a fan. I don't like the fact that we've moved towards this, what do they call it, the gig economy and 0-hour contracts and, you know, no contracts whatsoever. I don't like that at all. There is no job security, but there should still be, surely, there should still be workers' rights. Just because the way you are paid is different doesn't mean you're any less of a worker. You know, your work as a digger driver, somebody that drives a shovel, somebody that's a traffic marshal, somebody that sweeps the yard, regardless of whether you're on PAYE, directly self-employed or self-employed through an agency, you are still a worker, and therefore you should receive the same workers' rights. Now, you know, I don't believe that can extend to things like pensions and healthcare and stuff, because, you know, you'll be working with one company one week and another one the week after that and so on down the line. But I think the way in which you're actually treated, think about it like this. You are required, employers now are required to provide PPE for all of their workers. They are also required to supply toilet facilities, hot and cold running water and so on down the line. If you were a self-employed worker or working through an agency and you arrived on site to be told, there is a toilet, but you're not allowed to use it because you're not one of us, you could report them and sue. If you arrive, you know, in your jeans and T-shirt and they say, oh, everyone needs PPE, we've supplied it to everybody else, but not you because you're not directly employed, you can complain about that too. So why should the payments be any different? Peter McKenna says, we had 0-hour contracts in the 80s. I have to add, if I'm sent to a company for an agency, my terms with said agency are minimum 9 hours paid if I get there and the job is cancelled. I think that's absolutely right. I wonder. When I went freelance, when I left full-time employment and I decided I was going to become a freelance journalist, I went and consulted with an accountant, and he told me about, you know, becoming VAT registered and what I needed to do for tax and, you know, what I could claim, what I couldn't claim, and so on down the line. So I had all of that. Do construction workers that are effectively self-employed, do they have that same level of advice? And I'm thinking about this from my point of view, and I realise it's hard to balance what you do and what I do. But if I'm about to do some work with somebody, I mean, I've got a job, I've got a thing I need to do this afternoon. I need to send a proposal to somebody. Now, for one thing, I'm going to charge them for writing the proposal because they've asked me to do it. But I'm going to work into the terms and conditions of that proposal. Here it is. But these are my ideas. They are basically my copyright, my intellectual property. So if you look at this and think that's a really good idea, but this bloke's charging too much money and they go and do it with somebody else, sorry, fellas, you need to pay up because that's mine. That's my intellectual property. So while I agree that, just going back to Peter's point, if you're working through an agency, do you have your own form of contract or agreement with that agency that says, yeah, I'll come on board. Here's all my certificates. Here's my cards and everything else. Here's roughly the working area that I'd be willing to work in, that is sustainable and everything else. But here's my terms. You know, if I've got to go up country, you're paying for travel. If I've got to go for an induction, you're paying for that, or they're paying for that. Is that in place? I'm asking the question. I don't know the answer. Dan Khan says, true, Peter, but problem is employers don't take on direct now. It's majority self-employed now, and it's a disgrace that they're not taking on direct. Yeah. And although I sense we're going off at a tangent here, think about this. Recruitment agencies exist for one reason and one reason only: to make money. They are an unnecessary and, to my mind, an unwelcome buffer between those that want workers and those that want work. You know, if we went back far enough, those that wanted the work doing would employ those that were willing to work. I accept the fact that that's not the case, and I know those that, you know, the employers have taken a lot of people off their books. But if those that want the work doing were in direct contact with those that were doing the work, would there not be more money in it for both of them? Rather than paying that go-between who basically acts as a buffer and largely contributes nothing, and as we've seen from Dan Cullen's experience, actually cause problems. Go to this job, you know, pay 236 quid in travel. Oh yeah, no, that job doesn't exist anymore. Whereas if that had been Dan speaking directly to Fred Blogg's Demolition, yeah, you know, I'm willing to travel up. It's going to be 236 quid. You'll pay it? Cool. Okay, I'll be with you tomorrow morning. How hard is that? Jim Turner says, once bitten, twice shy. Anyone that fucks me about gets sacked off until they settle up what they owe. That's the deal. And happily, no one owes me anything, as I set out what I want right from the beginning. I think that kind of approach, and I don't blame you at all, I think that is an approach that comes with age and maturity. I think you've been around the block long enough, or enough times now, Jim, whereby you have learned, you've had the opportunity to be bitten once, and now you are twice shy. What if you're a newcomer to the industry? What if you've never been bitten? You go in all guns blazing. Oh, Mum, I've got a job. Yeah, fantastic. I'm working for, you know, Fred Blogg's Demolition. No, I know you've never heard of them, but, you know, they're a big name. You know, they'll be brilliant. 5 hours later, hello, Mum. Any chance you can send me 20 quid because I've got to that job and it doesn't exist? Peter McKenna says, yes, Mark, I generally go through their terms and conditions and edit them to suit. If they don't like that, I don't work for them. I've owned and run recruitment businesses. Without recruitment business, the economy would fail. They are an important part of British industry. Here's where we agree to differ. I think they are a leech upon the business. And listen, maybe my experience of recruitment companies is queered because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I reckon I'm contacted by a recruitment company or a recruitment agent probably 3 or 4 times a week who see the word demolition in my name, and I get the same email. Dear Mark, I've had an in-depth look at your profile. It seems we have a lot in common. We supply demolition staff, and you're in the demolition business, so how many workers do you need? Well, none. Fuck off. You struggle getting companies taking in casual workers on their own basis. The only way is through an agency. But that's been engineered. That is a system that has been engineered. You know, you go back to, listen, I'm not that old, but you go back to, you know, the construction of the M1, the M40, the M25, and so on. Most of that was done by direct labour. You know, all of the major muck shifters had a big direct labour force. But they engineered a system, not just the civil engineering companies, but the construction companies as well. They engineered a system whereby they were taking men and women off their books. Because, as I mentioned earlier in my spiel, ours is a cyclical business. And people like your Balfour Beatties and your Carillions and ISGs, not keen on things like long-term healthcare and pension payments and sick pay, maternity pay, and all of those things. So they engineered a system whereby they took people off their books, pushed them into self-employment. So now, and redundancies, they're not big on redundancies either. So now, if the industry goes up, they go to a recruitment agency and said, fetch me 100 warm bodies and be quick about it. If things go tits up, they don't even bother phoning anyone. They just wait till you arrive on site and say, oh, no, that job's done. You're off. Job done. That's what they've done. And because that's the way it works, the recruitment business has seized upon that gap between workers and those wanting workers and have leached upon it. Dan Cullen agrees. I beg to differ too. Chris Ford says, there's no flies on me, but you can see where they've been, and I'm not as daft as I look. Nobody could be that daft. Well, you look okay in that photograph, Chris. Peter McKenna says, in general terms, recruitment businesses take on work with rates being set by the contractor. As long as there is a 12% margin, you're able to pay your employee and make a slight profit yourself. Agencies don't make a fortune off each individual employee. They need to have a minimum 30 staff out in work to make a fair profit. So, several things there. A 12% margin. How many people in the demolition and construction business, people actually dirt under their fingernails or running demolition companies or construction companies, how many of those are making a 12% margin? You could probably count them on the fingers of one hand. Very, very few. And where is that 12% coming from? Peter, I'm not singling you out here. I realise, you've had your experience there. I've had my experience over here, and maybe we're never going to agree. But where is that 12% coming from? Would it not be, if you could do it in the right way, would it not be better for the contractor to have an extra 6% in their back pocket, and for the individual worker to have an extra 6% in their back pocket? And take out the middleman, for that is what they are. Peter McKenna says it's such a cutthroat business, though. Some agencies are undercutting by 5 to 8% just to get said contracts. See, that bit, I think, is non-reflective of the industry. Nobody in this industry, by and large, is making the 12% margin. This, however, is, because that represents a race to the bottom, which is precisely what the construction industry does time and time and time again. Times are getting hard. Quick, cut the rates. Cut the staff, cut the rates, cut everything. Cut, chop things up. Cut. Stop spending money on advertising. Stop spending money on training. Stop. And then 5 years later, things are getting good again. Where did all those staff go? Oh, you laid them off. Well, can we get them back? No, they're all in Sainsbury's now, stacking shelves, not at risk, not having bricks dropped on their heads, not being abused while on site. Speaking of which, there'll be a podcast out later, because apparently there is a decline in the number of women coming into the industry. All of those campaigns, all those initiatives, all that talk about properly fitting PPE, and there are less women coming into the industry now than there was a decade ago. Go figure. Dan Cullen says all companies used to hire directly or van pull up local garage to pick guys up willing to work. Yeah, listen, there's still a bit of that. I know of a few companies that still do a bit of that, and I'm not necessarily saying we need to go back to that, because who is verifying their suitability and their competence to work? But surely there is a happy medium here. And go back to the very theme of my monologue here. Surely there is a happy medium whereby the two parties entering into a contract, so the major contractor and the specialist contractor, can sit down, look each other in the eye and go, are you going to do the work? Yes. Are you going to pay me for having done the work? Yes. Can you prove both of those things? Yes. Okay, shake hands, let's crack on. Jim Turner says, but years ago, people understood the industry. The muck men were expected to be laid off in the winter, or if you were well in and valued, they keep you in work, but on shorter hours, so they didn't lose you to another crowd next spring. Now they go to the agency, so workers are easy come, easy go. Yeah, absolutely right. Dan Cullen reflected the very same thing. It's seasonal now. Summer rates go through the roof, winter go to the floor. Yep. Peter McKenna, I work for an agency that provides workers for Fox Group. Their employed operators are on between £13 to £15 an hour. On the agencies, you're on a minimum of £19 per hour. Is that gross or is that net, though? And regardless of your answer to that question, how do the employed people feel about that? I realise being British, we prefer not to speak about all things financial. But if you ever met that person on your hollybobs, where you sit there and say, I got a really good deal on this. The hotel only cost me £1,500 for the week. And they go, 1,500? I only paid £600. What room are you in? Oh, I'm in the executive suite. Yes, so am I. Fuck. How does an employed person feel when they know that somebody that's been dragged in off the streets in the nicest possible way is on the same or on a better rate? Dan Cullen, why not keep a standard rate across the board? Yeah. So much to discuss, so little time. As I say, I do have a proposal to write today. So, yes, I'm going to call it a day right about now. That is an hour and 13 minutes. By the time I've finished speaking, it'll be an hour and 14 minutes. So, the recap will be up in about an hour's time. The podcast about the decline in women in construction will be up around about the same time. I'll direct you to all of that. Go and take a look. I'll be back here tomorrow. I can tell you we've got at least one thing from Lugong tomorrow. So I'll be talking about that. What else are we doing? I can't remember. There'll be things. There'll be stuff. There always is. Everybody, go and look after yourselves today. Try not to be unemployed at any point, and try not to overextend the amount of credit you extend to anyone, because, frankly, in this industry, you just never know. You never know. No way should there ever be a standard rate. I'm inclined to agree with Jim on that. The issue you have, and I will say exactly the same about rates, and I will say the same about competence cards. The actual rate you are paid should be reflective not of your time on site, but on your experience and expertise. So, if you said, a backhoe loader operator is worth £15 an hour, and somebody literally came out of CITB Bertram Newton last week with a backhoe loader license, and then you compare that to somebody like Ken Hatcher, who's been driving one for 30 years. Standard rate doesn't work, does it? There you are, Jim Turner. Everyone is worth different amounts based on ability and attitude. Attitude as well, yeah, quite right. Quite right. Maybe we'll do something on that at some point. I can't remember what I have got lined up for tomorrow. I am trying to keep these morning monologues, writing them in advance, just in case something happens, and I can pull one out of thin air. Peter McKenna says, sad thing is, Jim, I know heavy haulage drivers that are paid less than van drivers. What a weird world we live in. Anyway, people, I said it would be an hour and 14 minutes. It's nearly an hour and 16 minutes because I've still been babbling on. So everybody, go and have a very, very good day. Try and stay warm. Be careful out there if you've got ice and snow and what have you. I think we're due to get some snow tomorrow. So until tomorrow, 10 a.m., bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, I'll see you all. And as Peter McKenna says, I'm going to leave that on the screen because I'm going to say exactly the same. Bye all.